Welcome to the Story Learning Podcast, regular doses of language learning tips and motivation to help you become fluent in any language. With me, Olly Richards. For language programs, books, free resources, and much more, visit StoryLearning.com. Good morning, everybody. It's Olly Richards here, back for another on-the-road episode of the I Will Teach You a Language podcast. How are you doing today? I am recording mic-free, not out of choice, but because I forgot my adapter. You wouldn't believe the number of things I actually have to use to record an episode of the podcast. I've got my lapel mic, which is great, and I've got my phone, which is great. But because blooming Apple, every time they release a new phone, they just take stuff out. The stuff that you've got, like mics, don't fit anymore, and you've got to get adapters. So, any kind of lapel mic, which is the kind of mic you clip onto your shirt, has one of those little round jack sockets, and of course that Apple took that away, so now I need a little adapter to plug my mic in. And of course today I happen to forget my adapter. I've got my mic, but I don't have my adapter. And so I thought, well, either I record this on my phone or I don't record at all. And my motto for life is that the show must go on. Don't let the perfect get in the way of the good, which is a fantastic language learning lesson right there. You see, we're only 60 seconds in and the language lessons are flying at you from all sides. So I thought I'd record this, and I'm sure you'll forgive me if the sound quality is not what you're used to. I mean, I don't exactly have the best sound quality at the best of times, but, you've been listening to 365 episodes of me talking into a mic, so I'm sure you'll forgive me if one episode isn't top quality. Anyway, we're going to get into a great question today all about language exchanges from Hassan. All right, so without any further ado, let's get into today's question from Hassan.
Hi, Olly. Great fan of your show and the YouTube channel. I've been studying Arabic now for a number of years. At the moment, I'm currently working with a teacher on italki. We are going through Arabic at the moment. But I wanted to ask you basically, because I'm finding that I'm still lacking in speaking. So I've decided to find a number of language partners that I could practice my Arabic with, and in return, they practice their English with me. But I was just wondering, Olly, what's the best process or format you can be with your language partner? I mean, does he speak to you in his native tongue, and then you speak back to you speak back to him in his native tongue, or do you, speak English with him or her, and then afterwards, halfway through, you go into Arabic or the native tongue? I'm just a bit confused, basically, into how to go.
Hey Hassan, thank you very much for a great question, and thank you very much for your compliments on the show. And I'm glad to see that you're doing well with your Arabic. Good job. It's a hard language, but very, very rewarding. I speak a bit myself, as you may know, lived in the Middle East for a few years, so I know what you're going through right now. So language exchanges. Okay, so you've kind of gone on an interesting path, haven't you? Because you've been taking language lessons on italki, and then you've found that your speaking is still kind of sluggish, and so you're looking for a bit more practice, and you're turning to language exchanges to get that practice. And that, by the way, is a fantastic way to go about doing things. And the reason is, and this is why I'm such a fan of language exchanges, it's because it puts you in real situations, with real people. You're meeting new people, and that means that you kind of have to adapt on an emotional level. When you take lessons with a teacher, you're kind of always relying on them as a bit of a crutch. You kind of wait for them to lead, and you reply to their questions, etc., etc. But when you're doing a language exchange, you're equals there, which means you have to carry the conversation just as much as you follow it, right? So that's what that means, is that you kind of have to dig deep into your linguistic toolbox in order to carry the conversation, because if you just kind of sit there and wait for the other person to talk, well, it doesn't work in a language exchange. So I think it's a fantastic thing to be doing, and especially now during this lockdown, if you've got more time on your hands than normal, which is not the case for everybody. It's certainly not the case for me. I'm busier than I ever was during normal times, even though I'm stuck at home. It's a very weird thing. But anyway, language exchanges are great, and I would do as many as you can fit in. And what you'll find is, I guarantee you, after a few weeks of doing a number of these, you'll find that you really quickly start to speak more confidently because you're just used to interacting with more people. So it's fantastic. So how to run a language exchange? I've written entire articles about this. In my Polyglot Playbook program, I recently did an entire session on how to on the, I think it was the 9 rules of language exchanges. But I'll give you a couple of my main thoughts, which will help you make them run more smoothly. First thing is, you've got to go in there with expectations already set. Okay, because the big danger with language exchanges is that as the English speaker in the pair, the big danger is that the whole conversation will revert to English all the time, and you won't actually get to practice your target language. That happens all the time, right? And so the best way around that is to manage expectations and to say to your partner, even before you get on the phone with them, so, hey, here's how I'd like to run the session. Let's speak in English for half an hour and Arabic in half an hour. And in the Arabic session, we'll have a no English rule, okay? And it sounds a bit extreme, but you've got to kind of plant your flag in the sand, because if you don't, that's when they'll just, as soon as you get what happens is whenever you kind of, there's something you want to say and you can't, and it gets a bit awkward, your language partner will switch to English because they think they're doing you a favor by preventing the embarrassment of not being able to say something, right? And they are in the short term. Trouble is, in the long term, they're holding you back, because so much of getting better at speaking comes from actually pushing through awkward silences, even when it's difficult. Now, that's how you build resilience and fluency in a language. So I would email or message your language partner before the session, say, hey, here's what I'd like to do, and have a very strict 50-50 rule where it's 50% in English and 50% in the target language. And in the sessions where you're in Arabic, stay in Arabic, and if they switch into English, just gently remind them, can we stay in Arabic, please? And they'll think, but that's really hard for you because you don't know how to say that thing. And then you'll say, yeah, but that's okay. I need to struggle. And now sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you get people who just insist on English, and at the risk of stereotyping people here a little bit, when I know the Arab world very well, and I absolutely love people from an Arabic language background. They're so much fun. I think Egypt, where I lived for a while, is the nicest people in the world. However, they're also very eager and very enthusiastic, which means they sometimes lack the temperament to kind of sit and be patient and to follow along what you'd like to do. Not always, but it's something to be aware of. Whereas a Japanese person, for example, tends to be the opposite of that, for better or for worse. So forgive the cultural stereotypes, but that's been my experience, and you're probably quite likely to find that with an Arabic-speaking language partner. So if that's the case, then sometimes you just have to try a few different people until you find that person who really is on your wavelength and is happy to stick with the Arabic-only rule. The other thing is that language partners tend to be quite... they're not experienced teachers. And so what they will often do is correct everything that you get wrong, because that's the easy thing for them to do, So if you say, for example, in Arabic, you say, I go to the shop yesterday, then the natural impulse is for them to jump in and say, no, I went to the shop yesterday. And so that, even if they correct you in Arabic, like you've asked them to do, that can be difficult, because then you never get a flow going. And one of the main ideas behind language exchanges is that you're trying to practice your speaking, which means not like becoming perfect at grammar. It doesn't matter if your grammar's faulty. What you're trying to do is practice your speaking, and if that includes mistakes, then so be it. So one of the things you might need to ask your language partner to do is to not correct you while you're speaking, but instead make notes and correct you afterwards. This is called, in teaching circles, it's called delayed correction. So if you find them stopping you all the time, then, politely and nicely at some point say, let's try something. If I make a mistake, don't stop me. Could you write it down and tell me later? And then if they catch on, then what that will mean is you're able to speak for much longer periods of time at once. And that's brilliant because you're trying to get fluency practice, okay? So you might want to try that. The other thing that's important, well, there's lots of things that are important, but I'll give you one more thing for the road, which is that as a language partner, you also bear responsibility to sustain the conversation, which means that you need to, in a way, you need to kind of, even though you're practicing languages, you need to not worry so much about the language, because the key, what you're practicing in a language exchange is cultural, not cultural, it's like social interaction. And social interaction is more about the kind of feeling between two people than it is about the accuracy of your grammar, which means you need to try really hard to sustain a conversation. And this goes for the Arabic time and the English time as well. And it's particularly hard when you're in the Arabic phase, because you're probably worrying about vocabulary and grammar and stuff. But you've got to really try to sustain the conversation and be as natural as possible when you're speaking. And when we're speaking a foreign language, these things often shut down because we become very self-conscious of our grammar and stuff like that. But try as much as you can to actually keep the conversation going, even if you know you're making mistakes. Because what that's going to show your conversation partner is that, hey, I can have a natural conversation with this person. I don't need to be all kind of teachery and correcting everything all the time. So whenever you get silences, which inevitably come, really push to try and fill those silences with conversation in just the same way as you would in English, because that's what being in a real conversation with someone involves. And if you really push yourself to do that in the target language, then you'll find that that's the kind of behavior which really pushes you to become a fluent speaker, because you're behaving in a way that a native speaker would. So there we go. There's a few ideas for you, Hassan. I hope that's helpful. I'm a big fan of language exchanges. I've done them a whole bunch. They can be incredibly fun and incredibly frustrating in equal measure. So don't get despondent if the first few people that you try a language exchange with don't work out. It's all part of the process. Simply, often I've had people ask me before, like, well, what do I do? How do I let them go if they're not right? And I normally say, well, just don't call them again. Just say you're busy. It doesn't matter. Just let them down nicely and move on to the next person, because it's really important that you do find somebody who can really help you. So anyway, that's all from me. Hope that was helpful. If you'd like to ask me a question, like Hassan did, then I'm all ears. Go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/ask. That's iwillteachyoualanguage.com/ask, and I will answer your question here on the podcast. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, make the most of the time at home, and I'll see you very soon. Thanks for listening to today's episode, and in case you didn't already know, I teach languages in a rather unusual way through stories. Now, stories are a great way to learn a new language because when you're engrossed in a story, you remember things more easily, and the mechanics of the language just start clicking inside your brain. It's quite something, and if you'd like to find out how you can learn a new language or improve your skills in a language that you already know and do it with the power of stories, then you should check out my free Story Learning Kit, which will teach you exactly how this method works and how you can use it yourself to learn a new language. Visit storylearning.com/podkit, that's PODKIT, to get free access. Inside you'll find explanatory videos, masterclasses, worksheets, short stories to practice with, and much, much more. Once again, that is storylearning.com/podkit, PODKIT, and if you're lucky, you might also find a link in the podcast description or show notes of this episode.